Okay, so now we're back from break. This is assignment F again. Now we're ready for page 4 of the handout. We've done the first step, which is to create the work new floor plan of level 1. So now the next step is to actually create our new walls for the addition on the back of the house. And this wall that we're building is not going to be 12 inches of brick with an inch of plaster. It's going to be new conventional construction, 2x6 with brick and airspace and gypboard, half-inch gyp. So we're going to just take the closest wall we can find, duplicate it, rename it, and modify it so that it has the layers of material that we want. Now in the handout I said, take this one that was supposed to be there, exterior brick 3 5/8 air, wood 2x4, and change the stud. Well, this is one time I actually made it a little harder than what the handout said, because I want you to just start from using the plaster and brick wall and duplicate that one. So I didn't even give you the other stud thickness. So you go down to walls here in your browser, and we're going to have to duplicate the brick and plaster wall. Because again, the way you make a new type with system families is you just take one of the others and duplicate it and rename it. So I'll duplicate the brick and plaster. And the new one has that space 2 on the end, so I renamed that. And I want it to be brick 3 5/8. So I'm going to type it out as 3-5/8 in the name. Okay, I'll slow down here. I duplicated the other one, and I'm renaming it to exterior brick 3 5/8, and then air 7/8. In fact, you know, when you're naming a wall type, you don't necessarily have to spell out the airspace, but I do want to indicate that it has sheeting board, SB 1/2, and then wood, WD 2x6. And then the next layer is gyp wall board 1/2, GWB 1/2. And then I like to put the total thickness at the end, which is going to be 11 inches, I think. And if we layer it up and it turns out it's not 11, we can always rename it to fix that thickness. But I like having that thickness on the end of the wall type name. So here it is: exterior brick 3 5/8, air 7/8, sheathing board 1/2, wood 2x6, and gypboard 1/2. And then the total thickness is 11. I need to put an inch sign on the end of that. I did, okay. So then once I've made it, I double click to go into its properties. And I don't have nearly enough layers, so I'm going to have to start inserting layers here. So the inside structure layer is now not going to be brick anymore. It's going to be wood stud. So I just go into that middle layer that's there, and I browse to the materials, and I say I want to go down to wood, so I can type W to jump down the list to wood stud layer. Okay, for the material, and I don't want it 1 foot thick. I want it, the 2x6 is 5.5 inches. And my interior layer, I want gypboard, not plaster. So I'm going to change its material to finishes interior gypsum wallboard. Okay. And I want its thickness to be 1/2 inch, not an inch. As I go, Revit is adding up the thickness of what I've already added. I've got 6 inches so far. So now I need a layer on the outside of the stud, which will be my sheathing board. But I want that inside the core, so that when I figure where the core ends, I say I've got stud and sheathing board together make up the core of my wall. So I can highlight that row and say I want to insert, and it puts another layer above it. So now that's not going to be structure, that's going to be substrate. It's slightly subordinate to the structural layer. So it gives that a number 2, and then I say the material for that is going to be wood sheathing. And I can say plywood, but we know most of the contractors are probably going to use OSB.
What's the difference between the two plywoods?
Well, I don't know how there ended up a plywood with a capital P and a plywood with a lower P.
One of them has a cut pattern, the other one doesn't.
So I should probably delete the one that has the capital P. And you can't delete out of this dialog, so use the one with the lowercase p, and it'll look better if you cut a section through your wall. And then I want to change its thickness to 1/2. And then what do I have on the outside? I have an air infiltration barrier, basically Tyvek, so I can highlight the core boundary and say insert above that, and that's going to be a membrane layer. That's the only kind of layer that you can have that has a 0 thickness. And really the only reason for putting this, you're not going to see it when you cut a section, but it's there in case somebody wanted to do a material takeoff. My mouse is moving on its own. If I wanted to do a material takeoff, I could do how many square feet of Tyvek I have. So it's under air barrier, air infiltration barrier. And the list under air barrier. And then I want to insert a layer above that, and that's going to be my thermal air layer, miscellaneous air layers. Seems a little redundant, but it's under miscellaneous air space. And I got one more layer to insert above that, and that's going to be my brick. So its function is going to be finish 1 with a 4, so that's the exterior finish. Now I forgot to change the thickness of my airspace. That was 7/8 of an inch. And then my material on the outer layer is going to be masonry dash brick. Okay, and then I need that to be 3 5/8. So in Revit, I say never approximate a nominal thickness. If it's 4-inch nominal brick and you know that's really 3 5/8, spell it out as 3 5/8. Because you want your math to add up. You don't want to say, oh, I don't care about 1/8 of an inch. Do it right, because it'll do the math for you. There's no fear of having it be too detailed. So it's 11 inches, so that is indeed the total thickness. So I say, I can preview it, make sure everything looks right. There's my plywood, my stud, my gypboard, my brick, and my airspace, and that little layer of Tyvek. Notice when you highlight a row, sometimes... No, it's not doing that. Sometimes it kind of greens it in over here, but it's not. So I'm going to say OK to that. Now I'm ready to put in a new wall. Now it's important that you're in a new plan instead of a demo or an existing plan when you build your new addition. If I tried to do something in a demo plan, here's what would happen, just to show you how freaky it is. If I go to my work level 1 demo, and I go home and I place a wall and I pick the new wall type and I start drawing, I get a message that what you just created you can't see in this view. That's because of that little new intermediate phase we inserted called the demo phase. And this view is not going to show us new. It's showing existing plus demo. So anything we create in that demo phase gets lost in the twilight zone. So if that happens, undo it. Go back to your level 1 new view. So now I'm ready to put in the new wall. Make sure it's the new wall type. I want the finished face exterior, and I want this new face to be 8 inches in from that corner. But remember how we have to disallow the joint. So I'm not even going to start the wall right up against that because I know it's going to get into trouble. I'm just going to start my wall out here somewhere. And because I want it flipped, I'm going to space bar it. And I'm going to come back and fix my dimensions in a minute anyway, so I'm just going to kind of be a little sloppy to get it in there. That part I can go ahead and touch. So here's where I want to adjust. I'm going to put a dimension from there to there. And I came awfully close to 8 inches, so I'm going to select it and make it 8 inches. Now see what just happened? Nick, you were asking earlier, is that really exactly 1 foot? Well, if the dimension is rounding off and you select the wall and click on the dimension, then it shows you the true number. So it wasn't quite as close to 8 inches as I thought. It's got a really ugly fraction. And you only see that when you highlight the number. So now it's 8 inches. And then before I drag that down, I'm going to right-click Disallow Join, because that way I know that Revit doesn't try to do anything funny where those walls come together. I can select it and say I want this point, not the T, but the point, to come in right there. And that's what I wanted. Now if I turn off my line thickness for a second, what I want this dimension to be is 1 inch. So let's see if that works out. From there to there is 1 inch. Now that shows extreme confidence in my demolition guys, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to have my plaster guy come back and layer an inch of plaster right over that, and it's going to be flush with the gypboard. So good luck with that. But that's that's how we're doing the model, at least. So there's my new wall, and I'm going to go ahead and go back to normal line rate display. So then I want 8'2" and 8'2" here, so I'm going to do a dimension from there to there. And this should be, what's 8'2" times 2 is 16'4". 16'4". Then when I come back and put in that window, that's a casement window, which we have to load if you haven't already. Let's go down to Windows and see if we've loaded that yet. Casement, a double casement window with the masonry sill and lintel. And we want the 2x4 mutton pattern. That's that one. And we want it to be the 80x48, so I'm just going to drag that out here and place it. And the head height is 6'9" 3/16". So basically that's like a 7 foot. I'm not sure how that works out. I'm feeding you that number and we'll look at it in elevation. So I said the head height should be 6'9". Well, it's up to a quarter. We'll do 3/16. If you're off by 16, I got 2/16. Marks. Let's go to our. We don't have a new north elevation yet, do we? Or do we? Yeah, new north. So let's look at that new window. You know what's wrong with this elevation? It's actually a section instead of an elevation. And this happens sometimes when you're trying to show something in elevation and the elevation marker is too close to the building, it's actually cutting through it. So the way to solve this is to say, I want to go to the view that shows this little elevation marker in plan. So you right-click in the view and you say, find referring views. In other words, find where I can see this elevation marker being referenced in another view. You can't find it, so I'm going to just pull up the new plan. And I'm going to go to VG and make sure that my elevations are turned on in this view, which they're not. That's why I couldn't find it. There's my new north elevation. No wonder. It's right up against the old part of the house. So I can just take that line and move it back. And then if I go back to that view, now it's really an elevation, not a section. But I put those walls in. I can tab to select the chain, and I didn't think to look at what height it should be. And I said the base should be not top of foundation. That's a typo in my handout. It should be first floor. Base constraint first floor, base offset 0. Top should be second floor, offset 4 inches up from the second floor. So level 2, offset 4 inches. So that's how my new wall should look. And again, I've got a section box in this view that's cutting it off. So there's what I've got for my addition walls and that new window. And then I need a new window on the east side as well. And that is another 80 by 48. So I can just right click and say I want another one of these. Right click, create similar. And I always forget to uncheck the tag on placement when I'm placing windows. Oops, delete.
Just turn it off.
It's better to delete it if you don't want it. I mean, you can go to VG and say I don't want to see window tags, and that'll work. And then when you need them later in CDs, you can turn it back on. So yeah, that'll work. And then I want a dimension to those windows. So I've already got this dimension string. I'm just going to edit the witness lines in that dimension string and pick up that center of the window. Remember, you have to click one more time to finish editing. And, you know, when you place things, Revit usually doesn't place them at such an odd number like it did down here. Usually I just happen to click right in the center of the wall when I place that. And this one should be 4'2" from the face of the existing. It was a little further off. 4'2". And again, just like we did in assignment D, if I want to run that as a center line, I can say I want that dimension type to be the one that has the CL and the centerline style. And I could do it again with that dimension string. Now, personally, I can see it without the CL if I have that dashed line style. I think it's pretty clear. And then we need to have a dimension here on that side that comes out. And the reason, and those of you who are architects understand this, if you're learning architecture, this is worth hearing. You don't want to dimension to two things on an existing building that you're trying to give dimensions to and have them potentially conflict with each other. In other words, I want to tell the contractor from there to this corner should be 29'8". So I'm going to select that wall and make that 29'8". Now this one will be 15 feet only if everything else on the building works out exactly like I measured it and put in the existing conditions. So who knows, this could be just slightly out of plumb, out of square. That might not really be 15 feet. And so you have to tell the contractor, okay, is it this dimension he should go by or this one? Because they might not quite agree unless I get that wall crooked. So I want this one to be the important dimension. So I'm going to come back to this and I'm going to add a suffix to it that says plus or minus field verify. So he lays this out, he comes back and he says, oh, that didn't end up being 15 feet. I'm going to field verify it, it's 14 foot 11.5. So then that's fine. So to add a suffix to that dimension, what you do is, this is the one time when you do select the dimension and click on the text. And you probably had this happen by accident earlier. Now you come in here and you say, okay, I want a suffix, and I want it to say plus/minus space F period V period for field verify. Or if you use VIF as your shortcut or abbreviation. So no matter where I put that wall, I could change that to 14 feet, but it keeps the suffix after whatever the real value is. That's how that works in Revit. So I've got my 29'8", and I don't need a suffix on that. Then I got my 15.0 plus or minus field verify. That's what FV stands for. And then I've got a door to put in here. I'm going to get that elevation marker and move it out there. So the door on the back is a full glass 3x6 with the lintel and the brick mold. And that's under, so this is all kind of review, but you're getting to do it. The key here is that I'm in a new plan when I do it. That way, when I go to my 3D views and I go to the 3D new view, and I pull my section box back out again, there are my new walls, there are my new windows. I'm going to put a new door in here, and then I'm going to have to put a new roof on it as well. So let's put the door in next. And that door should already be loaded because we used it in assignment D. Exterior, a full glass 3x6, 36x84. And that's going to swing in. So I hover over the outside edge and tab spacebar until it goes in. Now, I've got to, oh, I forgot that again. I've got a problem because the door is swinging 45, and that's how we indicate existing doors. We want it to be 90, but again, my doors just happen to default to 45. You select it, and you go down to its properties and say, I want the swing angle to be 90, and then you're fine.
You wanted that window to swing 90 too, right? Or is that like with a window automatic?
With a window, a casement window, it's usually just kind of a little dashed line that indicates. And that's not showing up as dash, but yeah, it's a more minor thing than on a door swing. But you know, some people might have slightly different conventions on that detail. And now this detail here that I show in the handout right here, I don't mean for you to actually bubble that and create the call out and create the detail, but I wanted to put that in here so I could show you what's happening. I want you to wrap that brick with a layer of 1-inch plaster, so that you have a finished surface facing in to the room here. And the same thing happens down here. So if I go back, now this might be one time, since I'm in my working new view, I might want to temporarily change my Well, let's try shaded with edges. See, I really want to see where the brick and the plaster are, and in the phase filter saying show previous plus new, the previous doesn't have any detail to it. So I could temporarily change that to show complete. And now I can't really tell what's new and old, but I can tell exactly what's there. And because I'm in a working view, I can bump it up to 1/2" scale and zoom back in. So now I can tell exactly where I need more plaster. And I'm going to say, okay, let's go home, wall, fur plaster 1 inch for a furring wall. Finish face exterior. I'm going to wrap it like that. Then I want to join geometry between that plaster and that brick and plaster. That plaster and that wall. Oops. That and that. And this is what's weird. Normally when you join two things, the first thing you pick dominates. In this case, I pick the brick first and then the plaster, and then it works. So I'm not quite sure why you have to do that. I just know that's what works. So again, when I do it on this end, I would think I want the plaster to win, so I pick plaster and then the brick and plaster. But that makes the brick win for some odd reason. So instead I say I want to pick the brick wall first and then the plaster coating. And then it cleans up the way I want it to. And once I've done that, then I can say, okay, I'm going to take that, and I'm just going to mirror that, and I'm just going to draw kind of an arbitrary line, and then I'll just come back on a line to that face, that, and the same thing to that there. And now I'm going to do my join again, join the brick and then the plaster coating. Here it doesn't matter because they're side by side, and then that to that. And it didn't work either. So if I pick the brick first and then the plaster, it works. It's just really backwards from what you would think.
Going back to that previous corner in the upper left. Right, take a vertical line from the inside face there. No, not that one. That line there, look up. I like that line. All right, up to the top. There's space there.
I was hoping you wouldn't notice that.
Well, that has something to do with the join deal that you were talking about earlier?
Yeah, I think it's just projecting where the plaster goes. It's a little glitch.
Oh, okay, never mind.
Yeah, it's
I
weird.
thought it was something that you had to join the line afterwards.
Yeah, it's just a tiny little glitch. You're very observant though, so to your credit. Now what we want to do is we want to fill in this floor. So I go back to home and I go to floor, and where is it? Here is floor. I'm in sketch mode, so I'm going to change it to hidden line so I can see my magenta sketch lines. Now this time I'm going to say I'm going to pick walls, and I want to go to the core here, which means past the plaster, and the same there. And then on these other two edges I have to use pick lines because I'm picking the edge of the other floor. And I can actually lock it, but I don't need to lock it because I'm not going to be changing that. So then I come back with my trim to corner, and I say this side and that side to trim, and then that corner. And I want to make sure the type I'm using is right. I don't want a 4-inch concrete slab. I want the wood 2x10 with wood finish. And I finish that. And I don't want to attach anything to the underside of this, so I say no. But I do want to join geometry. So now if I go back to shaded with edges, there's my new piece of floor. And I want to change my phase filter back to show previous plus new again so that I see what's old and what's new. Now, in this case, the floor actually has a pattern. Let me go ahead and put in this new floor as well. So I'll go back to floor, pick walls. I'll pick my new walls there. Pick the face of the existing wall. I'll pick that and that and trim. Now I actually want my new floor to come in and go over the top of that foundation there. So I'm going to have to come in and modify that. So now I'm just going to go to pick lines, and I'm going to pick the face tab until I get that line. Well, that's not even the one I wanted. That was the center line. Let's try again. Pick lines, tab, that's what I, nope. You know what, I'm just going to trace it. Sometimes tracing is easier. I can come down to here and back over to there. Now in order to trim this, escape, that has to be two separate lines, so I'm going to use my little split to chop it in two. Then I can trim that side and this side, and I can now finish that floor. I've got an opening somewhere. There it is, right there. I can't put anything past you all, that's good. So I ended up with two lines on this wall somehow. I ended up with two on all sides. That's weird. What was I thinking? Oh, let's try again. I must have a couple corners that don't. Oh, I've got an extra line there. Good grief. That wasn't the one I wanted to delete. I wanted to delete that one.
Uncheck extended and wall into.
Well, in this case, we do want to go past the plaster or the gypboard, and in fact, if you think about new construction, we actually want our floor to come out under the stud of the wall.
That's what
Yeah, so I really want to flip that, and that's all you have to do is select one of them and flip it. So now the edge of my floor comes to the outside of the sheeting, and for those of you who aren't as experienced, when we look at the section, I think that'll make sense to you.
Won't some detail after you finish, after you press finish, ask you whether that you want that to be embedded in the wall?
It should, yeah. So, but I still want to draw the edge of the floor to the outside face so that when it joins, the floor will still be shown penetrating, but it'll eliminate the thick lines. So I want to say no to this because I'm not wanting to stop any walls at the underside of this floor. But this one, that's the question you were just talking about, I think, and I say yes.
Yes.
So now I can cut a section, a new section through my new addition, and we'll take a look. We'll go to View, Section. I want a building section now. And I'm going to cut one right through this kitchen window all the way through. And go there. And change it to fine level of detail, and I'm going to go ahead and do colored. Ooh, that's too dark. Let's go to Show Complete so that I can see all of the elements there. Yeah. So my floor, here's what happened. I was creating floors. I wasn't paying attention. Remember that landing I built? It was at -6. Revit remembered that 6-inch negative offset. So now I have to pick that and say I want it to be back at 0. So it really helps to look at a section view. And then really what should happen here is the base of that wall should come down below. It shouldn't be start at the first floor offset 0. It should really be first floor offset negative whatever that dimension is. I'm going to go ahead and just see what that is. That's 10 3/4. And if I add a 2 by blocking there, it would really be what, 12 1/4 maybe. So I'm just going to offset it negative. Let's just make it -1 foot and see if that's close enough. So it didn't join geometry only because that wall didn't actually overlap when I created the floor. The wall was actually up here above it. So if I had created my floor at the right height and I had already dropped the base of my walls, it would have said, do you want to join? And when I said yes, it would have joined it. So unfortunately now I'm going to have to go in and manually join it and say floor to wall. And then that is how the detail should look essentially. And then I could put a detail component here, a 2 by 6. And that would really finish that off. Yeah, so I didn't quite get it in the right spot. But that's really why when you're building something in Revit, you're not just drawing, you're building the model and it's going to show up properly in all these views. So really that should be to get it exactly right. Now when they pour a basement, they normally do an 8-foot pour. And then that's the stop of the concrete, and then you put your plate on top of that, and then you rest your joists on top of that. So you're really seeing kind of how the building goes together in section here. And if I cut another section going east-west, and I'll cut through here looking south. Let's flip it around south. So I'm going to go ahead and drop the bottom of those walls to -12 1/4 as well. And then do a join geometry, or wall, and that wall and that floor. It doesn't matter which order I pick them in this case because the floor is always going to win. Revit just assumes that when you have a floor and a wall, the floor is going to penetrate the wall when you join them. So it even works out. There's my gyp, there's my finished wood, and then if I wanted again to really finish this off a little bit, I could really put a 2x6 plate in my wall. And I could come up here and do a double top plate if I want to. I got to put a roof on this thing, so let's do that next. That's my existing 3D. I want to go to my new 3D. Here's my addition. I'm ready to build a roof on it now. Make sure my door is in the right spot, so let's dimension the door. That should be 5'6". So I select my door, make it 5'6". And now I can go to my second floor plan, which I'm going to duplicate my existing and call it work L1, L2 new, work L2 new. And then I have to remember to change my phase to new, and my phase filter should be show previous plus new. So there's the new stuff. See how it lit up when I changed the phase filter? So that demonstrates how the elements know when they get demolished and when they get built, and the view knows how to filter out what it sees. So it's like the view is really a camera that's set at some point in time. It's like a time-lapse photography, really. So then I can come back with my roof. Now this is a little different than the other roof because this is a flat roof. So on the type, we want to use the one, ooh, that's colorful. I want to make a new roof type. And where am I? I'm on page 4 at the bottom. And it's kind of small on this handout here, but I show what I want you to use for the roof. The screen is too small here. Okay, so we want wood rafter, 2x10, 3/4 sheathing, rubber membrane. So I'm just going to pick one of these others and duplicate it. And I want wood rafter, 2x10. Sheathing is going to be 3/4 inch this time. I might be walking around on that roof. And then I want my, not asphalt shingle, but we're going to use rubber roof. They still not warranty those for residential use, though. Firestone, and what's the other manufacturer? So I'm going to edit the structure so that it really matches what I called it. So I've got a wood. Let's make this a 2x10, which is 9 1/4. And our sheathing is going to be 3/4. Then our top layer is going to be roofing, EPD, and membrane. And I'll leave that as a 1/4 inch, so it's now figured out at 10 1/4. So I did that all from within the roof sketch. So I don't want to forget I'm still in sketch mode. So now I'm ready to pick walls. The overhang I want to be 0 now because I don't want to have an overhang with this flat roof. And then I don't want these edges to define slope because I don't want to start a pitched roof coming up from these edges. So I uncheck that, and then when I pick the walls, I can have them lined up with the outside face of brick, and then those edges just line up with where the brick is on the existing building, and then trim those corners. Now, the last thing I want to do is make sure I've got it at the right height, and I want it to actually be negative 3 inches, 3.5 inches. So it says level 2, base offset from level, negative 3.5 inches. And then when I finish it, what's wrong with this picture here? It's wireframe, so I want it to be hidden line. So I shouldn't really be seeing those doors, but that's because I have an underlay turned on in my second floor plan. It's underlaying the first floor, so I want to set that to none. So now if I look at my section, Did I cut through here? Did I not cut a section through there? Let's go to VG and turn on my section cuts. They're there. Well, here's what happened. It's that old trick with sections only showing up at scales coarser than a certain scale. So I want to go to a larger scale, and I want to select those sections and say hide at scales coarser than, and I'm going to drop that down to 1/8 of an inch so that I always see those sections. So now if I'm at 1/4 of an inch, I still see them. So I'm going to go to this view. So there's how my roof rests on top of my walls. So I'm going to do the attached top base on these walls. And I can be a little tricky here. Remember how when you hover over something and tap the tab key, it'll select a chain? So if I tab to the wall, it should say chain of walls, but it's not. Much for that trick. I'll just do attached top base here. So there we go. Thanks. And then I'm going to go back to my plan and go to this section. And I'll do my attached top base again, attached to the underside of that roof. So that cleans up the line work. And then I just need to put a fascia on there. So I'm going to go back to my 3D new view. And this fascia should be a 1 by what? 1 by 12. So I go down to my profiles first, and I say, do I have a profile that's a 1 by 12? Fascia flat 1 by 12. Yes, and it's 11 1/4 by 3/4. So then I go to my roof families, and I look under fascias, and I see I have a 1 by 12 here. So I can just use that. I'll just drag it out onto the screen and attach it to the top edge of the roof. Isn't that beautiful? I did the transfer project standards with the metal copper, and I said overwrite, and so it overwrote the default roof color back to green, which is how the templates come. So I want to select that fascia, and I want to edit the type and say, okay, I don't want to go by category of the material. I want to pick material, and I can say finishes, exterior. I think I have an exterior trim. I have exterior wood trim, which is actually brown. But if you want to make another material that's painted wood, that's white trim, you can do that. And yeah, if you just have an aversion to flat membrane roofs. But I do want you to see how to build them, because we're not doing a commercial project, and it gives you a chance. And I don't even require you to do the foundations yet. We'll have to do those by the end of the semester. The footings and the foundation walls, and then the basement slab down there. So that's really everything we have to have done for assignment F. So I'm going to stop this recording. I'm going to keep my fingers crossed that it did record. It looks like it did. And this will be assignment F, new edition.